Nilay Patel, editor-in-chief of The Verge and a CNBC contributor. Nilay, I mean, I know it's popular to beat up on the big guys here, and certainly with some of the details that we've heard out of this, Apple and Google haven't always acquitted themselves well when it comes to at least the appearance of fair treatment here. But is there the risk of killing the golden goose if they buckle down too hard on regulation here?
I think there is, but I also don't think that there's any risk of killing consumer demand for great apps and services. And so the question is whether you're going to slow down the overall vibrancy of the industry and you're going to slow down how it's growing, but you're definitely not going to slow down people wanting to use their phones for more and more things. And I think the key question, as I watched the hearing yesterday and I read all the coverage of it afterwards, is Apple really thinks of the iPhone as their phone. They think that all of the commerce that's transacted in their store and in apps on the phone should accrue to them, and they should get benefit from it because they made the phone. That is a totally fair position. I think the app makers and a lot of user advocates would say, no, it's actually your phone. Once you pay Apple the money for the phone, you should be allowed to do a bunch of things on it without Apple getting in the way. And I think fundamentally, that question is one that Apple's not going to bend on because of market pressure. It's a question that Apple's going to bend on because the government makes them bend on it. I watched that hearing in a very bipartisan way. The committee was like, you should probably bend on this because all these companies, vibrant, great American companies, are kind of afraid of you.
Right, but Nilay, these are mid-sized companies, right? They've grown pretty large, and you contrast that with some of the small businesses who really appreciate that Apple ecosystem, see it as sort of a badge of honor once they make it in. And then there's the whole question of consumers, right? What do consumers actually want? I know I've said before that I appreciate that ecosystem, my payments all in one place. So where are the antitrust regulators going to land on this? Are they going to be focusing on the consumers or these mid-sized companies that say they're afraid of the companies?
I think it's both. And I think John brought up the consumer welfare standard. Lina Khan is a huge proponent of changing that standard. At the FTC, she's not going to change that standard. Congress has to change that standard. So I think what you're going to see is Congress moving forward, changing the consumer welfare standard so they're more focused on a competition. And then in a new generation of regulators like Lina Khan, like Tim Wu, coming in and saying, are these markets actually competitive? And are the steps that have been taken in Europe, are they effective, right? Because we don't think that they are. Browser ballots on Microsoft Windows in Europe have not led to a proliferation of browsers. Browser ballots on Android and Windows have not led to a proliferation of different browsers and search engines on Android. So there are these like heavy-handed European-style interventions. We don't think they work, but there's a whole bunch of other things you can try. And you can start by saying, look, if there was competition for distribution, which is what app stores fundamentally are, there's competition for distribution, maybe the rates that Apple charges would be lower. And maybe Apple wouldn't get away with saying, we keep users safe, while you can still find just explicit scam apps all over that store without trying very hard.
Yeah, Nilay, your point reminds me of this piece that Matthew Ball has written about the future internet and the ongoing evolution of the broad ecosystem. And he points out that no company's done more than them to make the internet what it is over the past 15 years. But he also calls them the biggest inhibitor to this next chapter because of the tolls, the controls, and the technologies of theirs that deny what gets made and that makes the open web so powerful. I wonder if you think that's fair.
I do think that's fair. One of my favorite phrases about sort of the Web 2.0 era is from Alexis Ohanian, who called it permissionless innovation. Right? You didn't have to ask for permission to build a website or a service or a great internet company. You just go out and do it and succeed or fail. And some people succeeded and some people failed. With Apple, you might not need permission right away, but there will come a point when Apple looks at your business and says, no, we want that one. Right? It happened with podcasts just a couple days ago. If you want to launch a paid podcast, you can do it through Apple's podcast app, which is dominant, and your customers will end up paying Apple a 30% cut. You will have to give that cut away. If you want to distribute a paid podcast through Spotify, well, you're going to have to charge a higher price because because Spotify will also have to pay that 30% cut to Apple. Now, is that fair? Does any value accrue to Spotify or a podcaster or a podcast listener by giving that money to Apple in that instance? Or is that just free margin? And I think the answer is like, probably Apple Music and Apple Podcasts and Spotify should just more freely compete for that margin, for that distribution power, for ultimately users and listeners. But there's no pressure on Apple to do it in the market context.